meeting for Wednesday, February the 9th to order. Please note that there is a fiscal note for 448 in your file, and our first agenda item is a hearing on Senate Bill 448. So we will open that hearing and ask Eileen to provide us an overview.
I was so prepared before now. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Senate Bill 448 amends 3 statutes pertaining to the act of rebating in insurance sales. Current law prohibits an insurer, a broker, or producer, or any employee thereof from offering or providing any rebate, discount, abatement, credit, or reduction of premium named in an insurance policy, or other valuable consideration not specified in the policy as an inducement to sales except to the extent provided for or in an applicable filing or otherwise permitted by law. Senate Bill 448 would amend KSA 40-966 and 40-2404, which is the Unfair Trade Practices Act, to specify that the prohibitions on rebating in current law would exclude the offering to make or the making of any contract of commercial property or casualty insurance. However, the exclusion would not apply to producer commission reductions not included in company rate filings. And you can see those amendments on page 1, lines 31 through 36 of the bill. That amends KSA 40-966, and page 5, lines 34 through 38, and that's amending the Unfair Trade Practices Act. The bill would further amend KSA 40-2404 with amendments made by the National Association of Insurance Commissioners that clarify certain practices as not being included within the definition of discrimination or rebates. And these practices are listed on page 6, lines 14 through page 8, line 7 of the bill. And lastly, the bill broadly incorporates the prohibitions and exclusions on rebating in the statute pertaining to denial of or revocation or refusal to renew an agent's license. And that amendment appears on page 14, line 39 of the bill. The bill would become effective upon its publication in the statute book. And with that, Mr. Chair, I can stand for questions.
Thank you, Eileen. Committee, are there questions? Senator Gossage.
Just a quick one. Maybe this is just technical, Eileen, but it has 448 and then it has SB 480.
Yeah, I need to fix that.
Okay,
That was a 3:30 in the morning deal when I went to sleep.
I know for a fact you're up at 3:30 because I sent you an email one time and you responded and I thought, what?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee, are there additional questions of Eileen? Seeing none, thank you, Eileen. We will now turn our attention to the proponents, Lee Modestat with the Kansas Insurance Department. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lee Modestat, Kansas Insurance Department. Apologize in advance for what I'll call story time, but I think it's kind of important to explain how we got here and why we're bringing 448 for consideration by the committee. This actually conversation started ironically with Senator Gossage when she was Citizen Gossage and came and met with the department related to a carrier who had sent some communication out about something that we weren't permitting within the Med Sup market that CMS had allowed in the Med Advantage market. That conversation ultimately centered around rebating statutes, what's permitted in Kansas, kind of how antiquated they are. Senator Gossage made some good points about resources available to consumers that would be helpful. That led to a broader internal conversation. And around that same time, ironically, this conversation was taking place across the country in every state, every department with multiple industry partners. Ultimately, that led to the NAIC developing a model related to rebating, again, because multiple states were trying to deal with the same issue. We didn't propose the model simply because it was an NAIC model. That came about as a result of engaging with industry folks, both in the property casualty and health and life space. And the general consensus that we got was everybody likes the model. And so that's what we brought before you. The one exception to that is the exemption of commercial property casualty insurance from the rebating. The reason this was included is we had received a request from a P&C carrier who wanted us to treat rebating for commercial in a similar fashion that commercial insurance is treated in other contexts. So, for example, excess lines would be a commercial product that's offered that's not regulated by us, and there's been a general deference to commercial clients being more sophisticated, for lack of a better term, than the individual or personal lines market. We know that there are some folks who have some concerns about that language being included. We included it initially, again, because we think it's in line with how commercial property casualty insurance is treated in the broader sense, but we have no issues with removing that language if it would get everybody comfortable with it to move forward. The general consensus that we've been able to gather from industry partners is that the model itself is preferred, and we could move forward with that. So certainly, if the committee desires after the hearing to remove that, would be happy to work on an amendment with that. But I think I've gone on long enough about why we're here and how we're here. A couple of quick examples of the types of things that we're talking about. So in the health and life space, an example might be Apple Watch or fitness tracker to help you lower your monthly premium related to, say, life insurance, or to help you have better health insurance rates. In the property casualty space, we actually had two different carriers approach us about wanting to offer water alarms as a way to mitigate risk, so that, you know, if your sink's leaking in your kitchen and you don't look under there very often, these alarms would alert you so that you don't end up with a lot larger loss. Those are currently things that would be considered rebates in the current statutes. This would simply kind of put clarity and parameters on what would constitute that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Lee. Are there questions of Lee? Senator Pittman?
Wouldn't you say you're going to make it clear about which rebates or value-added products are clear? Are you going down to the detail level of actual
Products?
products and things like that?
Great question, Senator. No, we're adding the parameters. So currently, the language is very broad. It just says you can't have improper inducements. And so that's subject to, you know, one commissioner may say, you know, taking Lee out to coffee to talk about his policy might be an improper inducement. Another commissioner may say, you know, that's fine, that's part of doing business, right? So all of the parameters here are identified, and the easiest way to sum that up is there has to be some connection to insurance. So I give the egregious example of, you can't just go offer, you know, Super Bowl raffle tickets if you come buy this, you know, really cheap insurance plan that doesn't cover, you know, what the consumer needs, right? So the benefit, the value-added product, the rebate, whatever you're using to garner that business has to have a connection in some way or fashion to insurance.
What is the overwhelming need to do this right now? Is it just because there's so much gray area? I mean, it's prohibited, so it's easy. If it's prohibited, it seems like, but if you get into this of trying to fine tooth comb it, it seems like, I understand you want clarity so that you don't have the challenges, I think, but what is the overwhelming need to do this? Are we stopping insurance contracts from happening now, or what?
Great question, Senator. The entire intent is to clarify any gray area. So there are kind of a couple of challenges currently. So again, it's not well defined currently. So each commissioner can have kind of their own view, if you will, right? And where that comes into play is when a carrier files you know, policy with us for review, depending on that commissioner's perspective, certain thing, you know, it says it has to be included in the policy, but during that process, if a commissioner wanted to, they could reject it and say, no, that's an improper inducement. And with the current statutory construction, that's very broad authority, right? And so it makes it inconsistent from one commissioner to the next. And then when you're talking about carriers riding across the country, it makes it inconsistent from one state to the next to try to be compliant, right? The second issue is, or challenge is, and I think it's in a way a good thing, we don't go on fishing expeditions. We're not proactively, going and checking every agent's website, every carrier's website. We simply don't have the staff or the time to do that. And so what ends up ultimately happening is the biggest source of complaints related to rebating is fellow agents. They find out that, one of their competitors is offering something that at one point in time, 20 years ago, they were told they couldn't do. We've had agents tell us they've been told they can't offer pins, as an example, right? And so, those memories stick with folks, and that kind of becomes the legend, if you will, and it carries forward. And so we're trying to offer clarity there. And then the final challenge here is, let's say you're an agent and your carrier decides they don't want to offer water alarms, but you as an agent or an agency do want to offer those. Under current law, it has to go through the filing process. If an agent were to offer that just on their own, out of their own, agency structure, they would currently be violating the rebating statute because it's not on file with an approved policy. And so that's one of those kind of bureaucratic paperwork things that doesn't really make sense to us, that we're making it difficult for agents to comply, for companies to comply with what is a well-intentioned, value add to the consumer. And so all of this is designed to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Lee, correct me if I am wrong, and this might help some of my colleagues, in the insurance world, if I'm an agent, so the company that I write for will file with the Department of Insurance rates. And in it will have everything that tells how they calculate those rates. So when that policy comes out, that's okayed by the commissioner, state insurance department. So as an agent, the intent of banning rebating was, if you came into my office and I was going to sell you a policy, I said, Senator Pittman, I can cut 10% off this and just forfeit my commission. That type of rebating is wrong, because then you're getting a lower price than what we have filed our rates for. So I am actually going around the insurance department to set my rates. And that was the intent of rebating for insurance. But because it's so vague, it has evolved to, if I have a pin in my office that I give you, is that now rebating and enticing you to buy this policy? So this just clarifies that, and I appreciate that effort.
Thank you, Senator Hildebrand. Senator Gossage, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When we discussed this a couple of years ago, we talked about the fact that Medicare had already implemented some guidelines, and I noticed here on, I think it's line 22, that it says the offer shall be made in a manner that's not unfairly discriminatory, and it lists that the department shall determine the maximum amount that the non-cash item shall be. And honestly, that kind of makes sense, but we want to make sure that that gets out to the insurance agents, brokers, producers, that they know what it can be. So you can invite people, you can have a lunch, you can explain whatever, but that lunch cannot exceed $15 per person according to Medicare. So something like that, I think, would make it very clear, am I crossing the line? Nobody wants to cross the line, nobody wants to lose their license. And yet, as you exactly said, having been the past president of the Kansas Association of Health Underwriters, we would get those complaints of, hey, over here, do you know what they're doing? They're giving away $50 for anyone that will give them a referral.
Right.
Is that allowed? So I think clarification is always good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Pittman.
Thank you. Just since you're up at the mic already, there's some written-only opposition testimony that's coming up. One of the things that they question is why it's only going to the, they're asking why commercial PNC is being carved out. And why is it so focused on this? Why instead of having it across the board? What's your kind of response to that?
Yeah, so I apologize that earlier I was mentioning that commercial is treated, generally speaking, differently than personal lines. So there's from a regulator and from an industry perspective, there's a general assumption or presumption that the commercial space has somebody who is, it's typically business to business, right? So they're, for lack of a better term, more sophisticated in understanding, the functions and operations, less susceptible, if you will, to false and misleading advertisement, right? And so excess lines is a common example of a business owner can't get what they want in the admitted market in Kansas, so they go to the excess lines market to find that we don't regulate that, right? And so agents already have access to services and products that they can offer that don't fall under our jurisdiction. And so from our perspective, we were looking at this in the optimal, which is that in the commercial space, more so than the personal lines, the opportunity for a long-term, partnership, relationship, business, exists there. And, candidly, as a regulator, we're not particularly interested in, hey, I saw that, my competitor took so-and-so to this place and they did this, you should look into that, right? I mean, ultimately, to Senator Hildebrand's point, the entire point of rebating really was to make sure that an agent doesn't sit down and say, hey, if you leave your current company and come to mine, I'm going to give you this deal, but you're really getting an inferior, product as a result, right? And so personal lines are more susceptible to just the cost side of things, or to, having the deal sweetened, buy one, get two free, only pay for shipping and handling, those sorts of things. And so that's why we went the route on the commercial. That is the one piece that's not in the model. We don't have any issues removing it and having everybody on the same page. We just thought that it better aligned with what is current practice in the commercial space.
Committee, are there additional questions? Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lee, for those folks that are not in the insurance industry, would you just define excess lines?
Yeah, sorry, I apologize, I didn't do that very well. So a small business owner meets with an agent and needs a particular product. We review rates and products that are offered in the admitted market. Excess lines would be those that are products or services insurance offered that is not in the admitted market. So it's things that fall outside of our jurisdiction that still are product offered.
So if it's outside the jurisdiction of the department, even if this was left in, would it affect them? Do we need to exclude them if they're not inside the?
It's still written by a licensed agent. So this is dealing, if an agent offers that rebate. So even in the excess line space, if they were to engage in something that was an improper inducement to write that excess lines policy, yes, that would, because it's the agent's conduct that we're regulating there, not the actual product.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee, let me call your attention to proponent written-only testimony from Marley Carpenter with the Kansas Association of Property and Casualty Insurance Companies and Hillary Segura with Property Casualty Insurance Association. Is there anyone else that would like to speak as a proponent to the bill? Mr. Sneed.
My name is Bill Sneed. I represent State Farm Insurance Companies. Unfortunately, because of a misunderstanding between myself and my client's testimony did not get submitted on a timely basis. So I wanted to get on the record that we do support the bill. We were actually one of the companies that dealt with the department on this issue on the P&C side, trying to figure out a way to handle what these new and improved products. I assure you we'll get our written testimony in as fast as we can. I'm happy to discuss this now or anytime you want. We support the bill.
Mr. Sneed, thank you for that. And would you mind identifying your client?
State Farm Insurance Company.
Thank you. If you will submit that testimony to Suzanne, we'll make sure that we get it distributed to the committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Is there anyone else that would like to be a proponent on the bill? Seeing none, are there any neutrals? Committee, let me call your attention to opponent's written-only testimony from Dave Holscher with the Kansas Association of Insurance Agents. A couple of things. Certainly not a snafu, but because we were kind of messed up last week, and timing-wise, this bill did not actually get read in until yesterday, so there wasn't a lot of time to submit testimony from when it was read in until those deadlines. I'm not sure that once the bill was fully printed and available, that there's been enough time to have discussions between industry partners. And so I don't have any intentions of working this bill this week because I'd like for some of those discussions to take place. And so those that have concerns or that would like to see either things added or deleted to the bill, I would encourage you to have those discussions with the department, and hopefully sometime next week we can work the bill and have a better product. So, any other business before the committee? Seeing none, we're adjourned.